people had issues with. So it was mainly this part. So it was this route, if you remember, right? So person, it was like person addresses. So we want to show not only the individual, but also their related addresses, okay? And the idea is, we'll pass through this business entity ID, which is basically the person's ID, One second. So I guess there's two things that can help with this. One is, if you look through these routes, basically every one of these is pretty restful. Meaning, in REST we have two different kind of like get routes, right? We have get all, right? Get all the entities, all the entities in a resource, right? So this is like our like index or the collection, right? Get all the individuals. And then this is just get one, okay? Get one individual. So this is, you can call this like the show, or like the member, sometimes you'll hear it called. So like all of our routes follow this, are asking the same question, right? /persons, specific person, /addresses. This is really just another way of showing a specific person, right? Because the idea is you're not only returning the individual, but also returning his address, okay? So this is really that same like member / like show route. So if you're doing that, it really follows the same pattern, as all our other show routes, meaning you find an individual person and then you return that person's information, When it's all, right, we find all the individuals or all the members of the collection. Here, right, this is an individual, right, this is the member one. So again, I actually did this one wrong. No, because it's multiple people can have the same last name. So I guess this is technically like a collection. All right, so this is a show route. So that means that I think the main thing is like split this into like the respective functions. So here it's like find the individual person and then, call the toJSON method. All right. And now what you can imagine this toJSON method does underneath is this calls, person dot addresses, right? And person dot addresses is like a list of addresses, and these are instances, right? So this is like a list of like address instances. Those just related to the individual, right? So this is one address, because an individual person have many addresses. Maybe they have like the work address and home address, etc. And then what do we need to do in order to turn this into JSON, right? Like, because you can't just send back objects through the internet, like Python objects. All you get to send is strings or something that is easy to translate into strings. So what we need to do to send back, the right information is one, the toJSON method needs to translate the actual individual into a dictionary. So that would be probably something like self.dunderdict, and that's like the person. Dict. And then, right, and that will give you something, right, like, I don't know, like their name, whatever, birthday or something, right? So that'll give you a dictionary, and then we would do like, probably get the addresses dictionaries, right? So for address in addresses, return the address dot dunderdict, right? And now these will be my like address dicts, right? And then I'll just put them together, right? Person dict, and then we can do addresses equals this, right? And then just return it. Okay. So if you look at kind of how this works, right? We call this, so we just call these two methods, find the person, call toJSON, but then that calls like the component methods, right? So it calls the relational methods of addresses, which should always return instances. Why should this always return instances? Because we're keeping that separation of concerns, like model view control, like when you return JSON, that's just for the view. Like that's just to send it back across the internet. But like what you want to work with all the time until then are objects. Like we always try to work with objects. So that's why this shouldn't return dictionaries. It should just return instances. And then we have a separate method that converts it to dictionaries. So you can see that, right? If we go to the person class, let's actually take a look at the toJSON one, right? So it does exactly kind of what we wrote out, right? Self.addresses, get the list of addresses, then convert it to dictionaries, then take the person, convert that to a dictionary, store this new key value pair, right? This is the key, the value is a list of dictionaries, right? And then return it, okay? And then now people had issues with this too, that to get the addresses. So this is so the way people relate to addresses is it's a many-to-many relationship. A person can have many addresses, and an address can have many people. You can see this. Let's take a look at it. It's this one. So it's like a person. This is all the schema, remember. So there's an address table, and then there's a business entity address table, and then there's the person table. So this is like the join table. So this is just an individual. This is an individual, like an individual ID and the address ID here. And then this is the address information. So we can see this if we go into what was the name of this database? Let me take a look, settings. This was, AdventureWorks. Yeah, let's go into AdventureWorks for a second. Oh, I have it up actually. We can do psql-d AdventureWorks. So I'm just doing /d per the name of the table I want to display, right? And that returns to me the business entity ID. So you can see this is the join, right? This represents a person, and this represents the address ID, right? So this should tell you it's a many-to-many relationship, right? Because we can have a person have many addresses just by listing multiple of the same business entity ID and give them a separate address ID, right? And in an address, multiple people can be at that business address or that home address. So, right, that's why an address can be associated with multiple business entity IDs. All right. So, okay. So, what was the point of this? It was for our addresses method. So let's go back to that. So for our addresses method, I don't think people had too much issues with this equal statement. All right, I think most of you are able to do this. We basically just have to join the address, because this is what we want to view, is the address information. So we do that from person.address, then we need the join table, right? And then we need to actually query the business entity ID here, okay? It might have even been, it's possible we didn't have to join all three tables. But anyway, I did. The key thing, though, maybe I can put a breakpoint here. The key thing that I think some people messed up was they just did select star, and that's not going to work. Because if you do select, if you don't do person.address.star, right? I'm doing .address.star to only get back the information from the address table. But what I saw some people do was just select star. If you do that, that's going to return the information of all three tables. Like each tuple is going to have not only the address information, which is what you want, but also the person information, and also have the join table information, whatever that's called, this entity thing. And the reason why that's bad is, well, what should this method return? It should just return our address objects, right? I need to fit this to create address instances out of this. So instead what you want to do is, do the select, but only return the address information, right? Only return a tuple of the address information, and then convert that tuple into instances. Okay? So you can see that, I think, if, well, how do we do this? We can boot up, here we are. So we can boot up my Flask app. I can go here, and then I just remember there's, no, it's not that one. I need to go hit the, this, so that would be /person/addresses, and then I have to pass through like a value here. So it would be slash person, and I think, let me clear this up. Person addresses like 1. Okay, now it's not, right, it's paused here. Why is it paused? Because we put it at a breakpoint. So it goes here, does the getDB connection, finds the person, calls person.toJSON. Once we call person.toJSON, that calls our person.addresses method, and that brings us here. Okay, so now I should be able to find the address records. So this is the address of the individual, right? If I look at what self is, right, we're in this method, so self should be the individual, and I'm figuring out where, that individual is business entity ID. I want to only get those addresses related to this individual. So that's this one address, and then self, right, is the person. So this is pretty good. And then the last step is for all the addresses, everything in the listed tuple, right, turn it into an actual address. And if we click on this, right, this should line up with what I'm getting here. So we have the ID, the address line 1, 2, whatever, the city, right, Newport Hills. I guess this is the ID of the state, and the zip code, etc. So that looks pretty good. Right, if we, go back here, you can see that this is returning the instances, right? There's only one, but that's pretty good. And then once I have these instances, then toJSON can, right, take each of the addresses, convert them to dictionaries, right, create this dictionary, and add in the addresses and return it. And then that goes here, and then I just send it back across the internet. Okay? So this is the main thing that, there could have been improvement on. Like I said, it's not, you can kind of ask, like, why do we do each of these things? We want to keep our relational method, we want to keep this relational method because we always basically want to be working with instances. Now if I want to do, select that address, right, I can, let me just do this again. Right, once I should be in my breakpoint. And I guess I removed it. Let's put the breakpoint here. Right, like we want to make a reusable method. So this addresses method, if I'm working with objects, then I can select that first address, and then I can call a method on that, like find out who the person is. If there's another relational method here, right? You can just working with an object means we get to work with that object's methods. It makes it easier. Once you start converting this into JSON, what you're saying is this is just to send across the internet. So you want to break this up because lots of times you just want to work with the object itself. All right, that's the main points, I think. Other questions? I mean, you can see my feedback. I think for each of the feedback, if you're not quite sure why I give this suggestion, you can, feel free to ask about it. Other questions about the quiz? In the answer, this actually is not the best, what I have here, right? I should be using I kind of say don't call SQL directly from the controller. But why is that? Why do I keep saying that? Again, the reason is because if you write the SQL out here, you're not, think about how we can use this. This is a useful method. Find a person by their last name. So it would be nice to actually just turn this into a method, and then I can reuse this code, right? So how hard is that? Not very hard, right? All I have to do is cut this, move it into here. What should it be? It's a class method, probably, because we can talk about class methods versus instance methods next. And just wrap it. Find by last name. Self is really the class, if you want to do that. And we probably need to pass through the last name. And then do this. Return the list of records where they pass through the last name. And then, for a record in records, go through here and do something, right? It's like build from record And then I think this takes the class name. So models.person and the record. Models.person and the record. And return it. And then we just call from here person.findByLastName. Right? So this would be person.findByLastName, and then we need to pass through that last name. Okay? So again, this is like a useful like this is, you think about, like, there's many times we may want to find the person by last name, not just here. So we move the code into the model level, and now we can reuse this method, use it whenever we want. Okay? And just remember, like, just remember that, right, this becomes, like, when I do person.findByLastName, this is the implicit first argument, right? So when I have this, the person class is passed through here. So you could even call this class if you want. That's fine, right? Because that would be the person class. You don't need to. And then, pass through the last name, etc., and return it. The other thing is, I did see some confusion as to, like, when to use a class method, when to use an instance method. Think about the return value. Like, what am I returning here? I'm returning, like, person instances. So in other words, you don't know when you're calling this method, when you're calling person.findByLastName, we don't know which particular person we're going to get back, right? We know, we can have multiple individuals with the same name. Like, we're not starting off by working with that instance. So we're asking a question of the factory, hey, factory, find me these proper individuals. You use an instance method when you have a question for a particular person, right? Like, person, tell me your addresses. Here we know who the individual is, and we ask it a question. Here I don't know, right? With a class method, we don't know who the individual is, and typically our class method is going to return, like, an instance, one or more instances from that class. So it's kind of confusing. Like, here we return multiple instances, but it's multiple instances of a given person. So another way of putting this is, the way to kind of figure out, are you using a person, like a instance method or a class method, is, what are you asking the question of? Here we're asking the question of an individual, like, right, of an instance. Tell me all your addresses. Here we're not starting with an instance. We don't know what that instance is. So it's like, factory, find me the instance, All right, so that's that. The other thing is, let's start, me included, trying to use types as much as possible, right? So this would be like the class, I guess it's like the person class. I think I can do it that way. And then the string, right? And then what does this return? It returns an example of the person class, So I think this will also help, is like, what's the input, what's the output, And then move through. Because this would have helped here. It's like, what's the input? The input is just like a cursor and self, right? The instance itself. And then what's the output, right? The output is a list of the addresses. Once you kind of have that down, then you're working towards it, Questions? I don't know. Other questions about this? Make sure you can do this part, right? Like this part. I think I'll just give you this to you again, probably on Sunday, right? Not the whole quiz, just this addresses part, right? To work through it. But the idea again is, like, break it into steps. They make a request, find the correct individual, send back JSON. And this send back JSON means we also have to find the related addresses and then convert it into JSON, right? And those are the steps. All right? Cool. All right. So